My husband slammed the door so hard that the chandelier above our dinner table rattled. I was 4 months pregnant. He said I looked at him the wrong way in front of his mother. 10 minutes later, I was bleeding on the cold marble floor of our mansion, begging for help, while his mother stood over me with a cup of tea and said, "It's karma for marrying beneath us." That was the moment something broke inside me. Everyone envied me Elena Park, the beautiful daughter-in-law of Korea's Han Dynasty family. But behind the gates of that glamorous estate, I was nothing more than a maid, a punching bag, a puppet. For 7 years, I endured every slap, every order barked at me before dawn, every smug smile from my husband's mistress as she waltzed through my kitchen. Until the day they pushed too far, and I decided they won't see me coming. Not this, Elena. What would you do if your in-laws treated you like dirt for 7 years? Would you stay or would you destroy them from the inside out? Let me know in the comments, and if you've ever felt trapped like I did. Type Justice subscribe to EN Reddit Story for powerful true revenge tales. Every day I wasn't always this quiet. Before I married into the Han family, I was Elena Park, the face of a national morning show, the youngest host to win a broadcasting award, and someone with a future so bright even my professors used to say, "She'll be running a network by 30. But love makes you do foolish things. I met Taiwan Han at a charity gala. He was everything I wasn't, heir to a business empire, raised in opulence, and trained to charm. At first he was sweet, attentive, even humble. He laughed at my jokes, brought flowers to the studio, and told his parents I was the one. His mother, Madame Song, was less convinced. She didn't even try to hide her contempt when we first met. She looked at me, a girl from a modest Seoul suburb, like I was the dirt clinging to her designer heels. Still, I believed love could bridge any gap. We married within a year. I quit my job, moved into the estate, and promised myself I'd win her over by being the perfect daughter-in-law. That was my first mistake. From the first night, the rules were clear. I wasn't allowed to sleep until I delivered a hot cup of tea to Madame Song's bedroom and bowed goodnight. I had to rise at 4 a.m. to visit the seafood market in the next city, just to fetch the exact fish she preferred. No maids allowed. I had to prepare it myself. Breakfast wasn't a meal, it was a test. Lunch had to be on time. Dinner had to be elegant. I wasn't a wife. I was staff. And yet, no matter how hard I tried, I was always too slow, too loud, too common. Taewon changed the moment the honeymoon phase faded. He stopped coming home, and when he did, he was drunk, angry, and violent. There were nights I'd cover my bruises with makeup and lie to the housekeepers. I'd say I tripped, that I burned myself cooking. No one believed it, but no one said a word. The worst part, his mother saw it all. Sometimes she was even in the room. She called it discipline, said all the other women in the family had endured the same. She told me, if you want the Han name, you carry the Han burden. I began to fade. I stopped writing, I stopped reading, I stopped looking in the mirror. But every morning, 2 little girls would run into my arms and whisper, "Amma, you're so pretty." They were the only reason I hadn't packed my bags and disappeared, but even they weren't off limits. When Taewon announced his run for city council, just a PR move for the family, he used me and the girls as props, forced us to smile for the cameras, to sit beside him like we were one big happy family. I wanted to scream, but in this house, silence was survival. I didn't have allies. Even Sophie, my sister-in-law by marriage, was struggling. She had just entered the household, and already I saw the same fear in her eyes, the same stiffness in her posture. Madame Song had begun grooming her too, pushing her into the same cruel cycle. One night I found Sophie crying in the laundry room. She said I thought I married into a royal family, but this feels like prison. I looked at her and said, "You haven't seen anything yet." I knew I needed to survive, but I also knew something else. If I ever got the chance, I wouldn't just leave. I'd take everything they ever built and burn it to the ground. The night I realized they would never see me as human was the night my youngest daughter got a nosebleed from the stress of that campaign shoot. She was 5. They'd forced her into a white satin dress, curled her hair, and told her to sit beside her drunk father and smile for the news cameras. Taewon reeked of alcohol. He slurred through his lines, kept patting the girls on the head like props, and Madame Song stood behind him, smiling proudly. It was all a lie. I pulled my daughter aside during a break and wiped the blood from her upper lip with a trembling hand. She said nothing, just looked at me with eyes too tired for her age. That night I knew it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about protection. I tried one last time to speak to Madame Song. I asked her to exclude the children from the next interview. She laughed. If you had given birth to a son, maybe you'd have a say in this family. Then she reminded me that my own mother had never been invited to this house. Do you know why? Because shame shouldn't be paraded. She meant it as an insult, but it gave me clarity. So I did something risky. I packed a bag under the pretense of running errands, and I took the train to my childhood neighborhood. My mother's hands shook when she opened the door. She hadn't seen me in years, not by choice, but because my in-laws forbade it. I couldn't bring my daughters, but I showed her photos. She cried and touched the screen like she was holding them. I didn't tell her everything. Not yet. Just that I missed home, that I was tired. Before I left, she looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You were born with fire, Elena. You may be cold now, but your ashes still burn." I carried that sentence in my chest like armor. Then something changed. Mr. Han Taewon's father called me to his office alone. We rarely spoke, and when we did it was distant formal, but this time was different. He said, "I've watched you for years. You never complained, never asked for anything. You kept this family from falling apart while my son plays politician and my wife plays empress." Then he offered me something I never expected: control of a struggling Han Group hotel. He said, "Run it well. Make it profitable. If you succeed, there will be more." I said, "Yes." And that night I didn't serve tea to Madame Song. I went to bed without asking permission. The next morning she came storming into my room and slapped me across the face. "You forgot who you are." I didn't flinch. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "No." I finally remembered. From that moment on, I wasn't just a daughter-in-law. I was a woman with power, and Madame Song. She had no idea what was coming. Of course, she tried to retaliate. She made up new rules, demanded I wake at 3 a.m. to prepare elaborate breakfasts, made me mentor my new sister-in-law, Sophie, and even brought Mira, one of her old socialite protégés, into the house, under the guise of tutoring the children. But I knew what she was doing. She wanted chaos. She wanted me to break. So I smiled, and I documented everything. The schedules, the demands, the insults. Behind closed doors, I reached out to Lawyer Kim, one of the few men in the Han circle, who hadn't sold his soul. He agreed to help me. "I've waited years for someone to take that woman down," he said. Now the game had begun. I was done surviving. It was time to strike. The turning point wasn't loud. It was a photograph. Mira had invited my husband Taewon to a private viewing at her art gallery. I tagged along not because I was invited, but because something felt off. She greeted me with that artificial smile of hers, showed us a pair of modern oil paintings, and said they were exclusive imports. Taewon nodded like he knew what he was doing. But the second he glanced at Mira, just a flicker of eye contact, it clicked. They were hiding something, so after the event, I handed one of the gallery brochures to Lawyer Kim. "Can you find out how much these paintings actually cost?" 3 days later, he called. They bought them for pennies, then sold them to the Han Group for 200 times the price. It was corporate fraud. On paper, Taewon and Mira had just stolen tens of billions from the family company. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I made tea, and I waited. A week later, Mr. Han summoned me again. He asked how the hotel was progressing. I told him the truth. It was stabilizing. Profits were rising. The new chef I hired had tripled reservations. Customers were returning. He leaned back and smiled. "If you can keep this up for 1 year, I'll give you 10% of the Han Group's shares. And if you give me a healthy grandson, another 5%. I nodded. But inside, I wasn't thinking of babies. I was thinking of leverage. With 15%, I could become the largest private shareholder. I could veto their decisions. I could bury them with a smile. But before I made a move, I needed to protect my own. My younger brother, Han Sung, had just started working at Mira's gallery. I didn't think much of it until a call came late at night. It was Mira. Her voice was sharp, cold, surgical. "You really thought you were the only one who could play games." Elena, the next day, Han Sung was arrested, charged with forging purchase records and laundering funds for the gallery. It was a setup. I went straight to Mr. Han. I begged him, "I'll give you anything. Just don't let them ruin him." He looked at me with something almost like pity. "Elena, you're clever, but your brother isn't my son." In that moment, something inside me froze. I realized no matter how much I did for this family, I would never be family. Not really. I went home in silence that night. Mira hosted a dinner at the estate. She wore a silver dress, kissed Taiwan on the cheek, and acted like the queen of the household. And no one said a word. Not even Madame Song. That was the moment I snapped. When Taiwan stumbled upstairs, reeking of wine and Mira's perfume, I followed him. He tried to touch me. I shoved him so hard he hit the dresser. He called me crazy. I looked at him dead in the eye and said, "Next time you raise your hand to me, I'll raise the entire police force." He laughed, said, "You're nothing. You were nothing before me. You'll be nothing after." But he didn't know what I knew. I had evidence, photos, documents, audio clips, witness statements, every bruise he ever left. I had documented every time Madame Song screamed at me. I had the tapes. I had waited 7 years for this moment. Now I would move swiftly, quietly. And when I struck, they wouldn't see it coming. I started with the hotel. If I wanted power, I needed results. Numbers, proof that I wasn't just a wife. They had to see me as an asset they couldn't afford to lose. So I fired the boardroom deadweight. Men who'd been drawing bloated salaries for years, while the hotel hemorrhaged money gone. Madame Song was livid. She stormed into Mr. Han's office and called me an ill-bred village girl playing CEO. But for once, Mr. Han didn't side with her. He said they've been draining this place for 5 years. Elena had the guts to do what I couldn't. That was the first time he called me by name. Not her. Not that girl. But Elena. I wasn't his daughter-in-law anymore. I was his weapon, and I wielded that power with surgical precision. I upgraded every floor of the hotel, hired a new executive chef, built partnerships with influencers and travel platforms. Within 2 months, we went from red to black. And just as the numbers turned around, I made my next move, Mira, the woman who smirked when I miscarried, who framed my brother, who whispered poison into my husband's ear. I waited until she thought I'd forgotten. Then I invited her to a celebration dinner. She came in a backless dress, high on her own arrogance. I handed her a single envelope. Inside, bank records, fake invoices, gallery correspondence, and worst of all, photos of her and Taewon, signing the forged painting contracts. She went pale. I smiled. "You'll go to the authorities. You'll tell them it was all you and Taewon. And in return, I won't leak the photos of you with the gallery intern." Her eyes widened. Yes, I had those too. She tried to laugh it off, but I saw her hands shaking. She didn't respond that night, but 2 days later, she disappeared. Gone. No calls, no messages. It didn't matter. I had what I needed. And then Madame Song tried to strike. She fired the girl's tutor and brought Mira back. Yes, that Mira into the house as their academic advisor. She changed my daughter's schedules, made them skip violin lessons and start etiquette training. At 5 and 7 years old, she made new rules. Elena must wake at 3 a.m., prepare full breakfasts, oversee Sophie's etiquette, and host weekly teas for society women. And she sent Sophie, poor Sophie, on wild errands in the rain, just to humiliate her. Sophie came to me in tears. "I can't do this. I didn't sign up for this." I looked her in the eyes and said, "Neither did I. But if we're smart, we won't suffer. We'll rule." I gave her a key to what she asked, to your escape. I had already bought Sophie a luxury car in her name, already transferred a starter fund into a private account, already arranged an HR role for her in the hotel, working only 2 days a week with 10 times her old salary. She gasped, "Why are you doing this?" "Because no woman should survive this house alone." But Madame Song wasn't finished. She publicly berated Sophie at a family brunch, scolded her for not smiling enough, for not sitting like a lady in front of guests. Sophie ran to the bathroom and cried. And that was the moment Mr. Han noticed. He pulled me aside later that evening and asked, "How much longer do you plan to endure?" I said, "I'm done enduring, I'm building." He nodded. "Good. Because I'm ready to appoint you vice president of the group." I froze. He continued. "But there's a condition. No divorce. I need a united image while we fend off investors." So that was his game. He didn't care about my well-being. He cared about headlines. But I agreed. On paper. And secretly, I filed for divorce the next day. Not quietly, but through the press. Front page news. CEO's wife seeks divorce. Demands 500 billion won in damages alleges. Years of domestic abuse. Madam Song choked on her tea. Taewon went berserk. Mr. Han called me. You betrayed my trust, I replied. No, I fulfilled your business goals. Now I'll fulfill mine. The first blow had landed. The war was on. Taewon didn't come home that night. Instead, he barged into my hotel office the next morning, reeking of whiskey, his tie hanging like a noose. You think this divorce makes you powerful, he hissed. Without this family, you're nothing. I stood calm and looked him in the eye. No. Without me, you'd already be in prison. He lunged at me right there in front of 2 hotel staff members. I stepped aside. He stumbled, hit the edge of the desk, and howled in pain. Security rushed in. He screamed at them to get out, but I didn't stop them. You want to ruin me, Elena, he yelled. I'll take you down with me. Then he spat out something I'd never forget. I'll make sure our daughters end up just like you, trapped and broken. That was it. No more patience, no more playing safe. I pressed charges: physical assault, corporate fraud, and psychological abuse. And for the first time, the law listened. Because I had the evidence, dozens of medical reports, a hard drive filled with video footage from private cameras I'd installed 2 years ago. Every bruise, every scream, every drunken rage he unleashed, I had it all time-stamped and archived. Within 48 hours, a warrant was issued. And while the world focused on Taewon's meltdown, I made my final move against Madam Song. You see, I had quietly been collecting records from her secret art gallery pieces, illegally imported and sold under false titles. Most of them came from Mira. With lawyer Kim's help, I submitted the entire ledger to the prosecutor's office. They raided the gallery within the week. I wasn't there, but I heard Madam Song collapsed when they seized the last painting, but she didn't give in. No, she raged. She stormed back to the estate, screamed at the maids, tore up Sophie's work contract, and called my daughters ungrateful parasites. She even tried to throw me out of the house that I now legally co-owned. But I didn't flinch. I met her at the bottom of the stairs and said, "This isn't your empire anymore." Mr. Han tried to play the mediator. He begged me to hold back for the company's sake. I told him the truth. There's no company without me. And if you push me, I'll drag all of you down that night. Sophie collapsed from exhaustion and was rushed to the ER. The doctors said stress-induced anemia. While she lay there, Madam Song barged into the room and said, "You're not sick. You're lazy." I stood between them and said, "If you speak again, you'll leave this hospital in handcuffs." She laughed, until she saw Mr. Han behind me, silent and grim. "Enough," he said. "You've destroyed everything I built." Even then, she didn't understand. She thought this was still a chessboard and I was just a pawn. But the game had changed. I was the one moving pieces now. 2 days later, Taewon was arrested at a nightclub mid-drink. Reporters caught everything. He tried to run, tripped, fell, screamed about betrayal. He was dragged into a van while shouting my name. Good. Let them see who he really was. Madam Song, she tried to flee the country, but I'd already ensured her passport was flagged. Immigration held her at the airport. She called me from a holding room. "Elena, you ungrateful snake." "You were nothing," I responded softly, "and yet here I am signing the paperwork that removes your name from every corporate ledger." Then I hung up. At the next shareholder meeting, Mr. Han stood beside me and declared, "Elena Park is now vice president of the Han Group." No one objected, because in just 6 months, I had turned a failing hotel into a billion-won profit machine. I had rebuilt the brand, I had won public sympathy, and I had outplayed every monster in that cursed house. But I wasn't finished. I visited Taiwan in prison. He looked at me through the glass and said, "You ruined me." I smiled. "No, you ruined yourself." I just took notes. He begged me to take him back. Promised he'd change. I slid a book across the counter. "Prison Survival for Dummies. You'll need this more than me." Then I walked away. I never turned back. 1 year later, the Han family estate is quiet. No parties, no press, no political campaigns, just silence. Madam Song is serving a 6-year sentence for tax evasion and illegal art trafficking. Her hair has turned gray behind bars. No more silk robes, no more servants. Just a steel bed and fluorescent lights. Taewon's case dragged longer, but with Mira's confession and the financial records I submitted, he was sentenced to 9 years for corporate embezzlement and domestic violence. Sophie finally divorced. She moved abroad, started over, and now writes columns for women's rights publications. She says she's never felt more free. And Mr. Han, he left the country after stepping down as chairman, citing health issues. But I think deep down he knew the kingdom he helped build had rotted from the inside, and I was the reckoning. As for me, I wake up at 7 a.m. now. Not 4, I don't serve tea. I drink it on the balcony of my penthouse. My daughters laugh more. They sleep peacefully, they go to school without fear of being used as campaign props. Sometimes I pass the mirror and hardly recognize myself. Not because I've changed on the outside, but because for the first time I see someone I admire. Someone who protected her children, who stood up after being broken, who took 7 years of silence and turned it into power. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: enduring abuse doesn't make you weak. Planning your exit quietly, patiently, and striking with precision that takes more strength than most will ever understand. You don't need to scream to win. Sometimes, you just need to wait. And when the moment comes, you move, and you never look back. What did you think of Elena's story? 7 years of silence, isolation, and pain. Yet when her moment came, she didn't just escape. She exposed them. She outsmarted them. She rebuilt her life piece by piece, without ever raising her voice. And that's the truth. No one talks about revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet, calculated smile. Sometimes it's walking away from the very people who swore you'd never make it. If you've ever felt trapped, underestimated, or dismissed like Elena, remember your strength isn't in how loudly you fight. It's in how clearly you know your worth. So what would you have done in Elena's place if you've ever endured something similar? Type Talker Justice in the comments if you believe she did the right thing. Vote Pirate 2. If not, vote Tark 7 and tell us why. We want to hear your side. Let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget, subscribe to Ian Reddit Story for powerful, real revenge tales every single day. Because some stories deserve to be heard.